recording. Alrighty, so I'm pretty much blocked out here. I've done all my primary and kind of secondaries. I'm happy that overall the shape of my sculpture is where I want it to be. I could go ahead now and dynamesh a bunch of these parts and start to make them into high enough resolution so that I can start applying textures. But what I want you guys to get into the habit of is non-destructive editing. So that's doing things in ways so you can always go back a step or always go and reclaim bits or readjust things. Now, very foolishly, I've got things set up into a lot of different folders. So I'm just going to drag some of these pieces out for now and do a little tiny reorganize. So I've got my head. Let's pop that in there. What I want to get is all of my general body mass into the same little section like this. So I've got head as a separate tool, torso as a separate tool, arms and legs. I'm going to keep the teeth, the eyes, and any claws, fingernails, things like that as separate subtools for now, because I'm not going to want to apply the same texture to those as I am the rest, and they're going to be quite low poly anyway. For this, I'm going to make duplicates of everything. I'm still, like, even the total of all of my subtools at the minute is only 1.2 million. I can afford to have a little bit more. So I'm going to duplicate the head. I'm going to duplicate the tummy, arms, and legs. And get these organized in a way so that they all sit together nicely. Let's pop that up there. So I've got head, torso, arms, feet. Head, torso, so I can pop some of this away, have a look. Again, I'm a big fan of keeping my subtool menu nice and tidy so I don't make silly mistakes. But essentially I'm going to start with the head and I'm going to merge these down. So down to merge in my subtool menu, merge down, double check that I'm in the right subtool selected. Head and torso are the same one now. Let's do a merge down again, okay. And then a merge down again, okay. Now I have a single subtool that's all of these pieces. I'm going to pop a dynamesh on that, but I'm going to tidy up these bits first. I can go there. I don't think I had a separate one for the feet, did I? Let's do a new folder for feet. And I can just go in there for now. So I've essentially got this little guy here. It's, what, 756,000 points. I'm going to get a dynamesh on this. I'm going to go for a medium resolution. So geometry, dynamesh. Let's try it out at 300 and see whether I lose much. Didn't lose much at all. Now, I've got this weird funny pattern on there, and that's because all of this stuff is still visible. So let's hide that. I don't think I feel like I lost anything there. If you're ever unsure, you can just scroll back along your history. That dynamesh has cost me no detail at all, which is lovely. It's exactly where I want to be. The dynamesh here has basically just made these, the geometry where it would have intersected, it's gotten rid of all of that intersection. It's made it one kind of external piece. So I got my one guy. He's only 1.3 million polys, so that's not a lot of 1.3 million points. It's not a lot of space to add detail to. And it's also, if I turn on this, the geometry itself, let's turn fill off and have a little zoom in. The way Dynamesh projects its geometry is it basically just fires a grid at it and gives you more for more resolution. What we want for this retopology process is the ability to step through various resolutions and also have more resolution where we have more detail and kind of creases in the right places. Now, retopologizing is a whole fucking thing on its own, but ZBrush has quite a cool process that we can use, or quite a cool tool, and it's called Z-Remesher. What we're going to do here is come into, it's in the geometry menu, we're going to come to Z-Remesher. We're going to turn off Adapt. We're going to turn on Half. And what that will do, that will apply a calculation that changes the way our geometry is laid out. Yeah? Before I do that though, because I'm halving the amount of points, I'm going to lose detail. What I want to do here on my history bar is hold control and just click up there. Can you see that little orange block now has a lighter colored block on the inside of it? I'll click it again. So that's what it looks like normally. And then I click that. What that is doing, that's recording recording a history. That history is the surface topology. Yeah? So the layout of my geometry in a very specific shape. It's basically remembering where all of those points are. This will come in handy later. All right, so I have made sure that I've clicked on my history bar. I've come into Z Remesher, adapt off, half on. Keep creases is worth popping on. And I'm going to hit Z Remesh. Now this, depending on your machine, will take a little while, 30 seconds to a couple of minutes, especially if you're in one of the other rooms. These are really fast computers. But what this does, 9 seconds, ooh, these are fancy. If I turn this back on now, can you guys see the difference in the way the topology is laid out, or the way the geometry is laid out? So rather than a straight grid projection where this curves, the lines, the edges of my polys now curve around that. And around the eyes, where I've got lots and lots of movement, you can see that those lines are way closer together. So what Z Remesher is doing is giving us a light retopologize, and it's moving our geometry to where we're going to be able to make most use of it. I'm going to do that again. And that's got me down to 270,000 points from 1.3 million. And actually, it doesn't look that much different. Okay, I'm going to do again, Z Remesher. I'm going to do this a couple of times till I get down to around 50,000 points, and it's going to look all blocky and chunky and kind of adorable. Now you should be able to make out, now you can see that that arrangement of the geometry is much neater. Again, like in areas in the mouth where there's lots of creases, it's giving me a lot more geometry. But now I'm definitely starting to get a little bit chunky, and I'm losing a little bit of that detail. I don't mind though, I'm going to do it again. Down to 55. This is kind of where I want to be. Again, if I have a little look at that, you can see now that my individual polys are very visible. This will help later on for any kind of movement or adjusting of poses. I like to work in multiple subdivisions from this point, because once you start getting texture on, it gets really precious. And if you want to make changes, it's really difficult to kind of then sculpt over and then reapply texture. I'll show you this as we get towards the end after I've applied some stuff, but what this allows you to do is step back through multiple levels of geometry.
Does it let like the texture move with it?
This is the cool thing. So if I'll show you this in real time, but once I've done this process, I can have a low subdivision level, which is this one at 50,000 points, but I can also have a version that's 3 million. So the 3 million, I can apply loads of detail, and then just pop that slider back, make any changes that I want, and then slide it back up, and that top subdivision layer will still have all of that detail. It's very, very, very cool. All right, so I'm here, and things are definitely feeling a little chunky. Do I want to go a little bit further than that? No, I'm going to stick with that. Once we've done that, you've done this a couple of times, gotten to around 50,000, I'm going to come up to the top of the geometry menu, and I'm going to hit divide once, twice, 3 times. If you start at 50, hit it 3 times, you're going to be at around 3.5 million. Now, 3.5 million is what I would say is perfect for a head. Yeah, you're going to be able to get enough detail on that. This is going to be a slightly lower detail model. I think 3.5 million for what we're doing is just fine. But now you can see that even though I've got all of that lovely geometry back, my topology is a little fuzzy, and I've still lost all of that lovely detail that I'd put in. So what I'm going to do is come into my subtool menu, down to project, and then hit project history. So remember this little mark we made up here? Yeah, that was a snapshot of our topology. So what I've got now, as it's applied that, is this brand new super neat geometry, but with the old topology applied to the top of it. So if I pop polyline fill on now, I've still got my topology flowing flowing around the forms. I've still got extra geometry increases in places where I might need more detail, but I've managed to kind of retain all of the stuff that I had on last time. Perfect. Yeah. And what's great about this now is if I come into my geometry menu, I'm now working in subdivision levels. I don't want to go anywhere near Dynamesh. Yeah. If I need more detail, I'm just going to hit divide, and that'll take me to 8 million points. If I want less, I can just slide that down. And this is great if you want to make moves. So if you want to move a piece let me do a little move on this head, and I'll show you. So if I mask off a section and then tap that mask to blur it out, you see there's very little movement on that blur. And then if I try and move this, what happens is this crunchiness. It's basically moving it along a very specific line, yeah? Whereas if I go back a little bit, how many steps am I going to do with that? There we go. So that was before the move. So let's take that mask off. If I drop that to a lower subdivision level and then do the same move, and then look at how much... Why are you following me around? Do you see how much that blur's spreading out? And now if I do a move, everything's kind of a little bit neater. Let's do that a couple more times. It's less aggressive, it's less kind of, that line isn't there. So if you want to like move arms and limbs and do posing, you want to have an option for a low geometry mesh. Let's go back to where I was. All right, that's one of the benefits. The other benefit is when it comes to applying textures. Now, I've got this set to quite a low subdivision level, quite a high subdivision level now. I've got quite a lot of points. So if I come in with a damn standard and start to kind of sculpt in, you can see that I can get really kind of high levels of detail. And that's great. But there's a superpower here. We're going to start working with what's called alphas. Okay, has anyone done traditional sculpting and used texture stamps before? No? Basically but like taking a thing and jamming it into the clay to give you a base texture. That's essentially how I like to use alphas. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab a brush that I use for this. I always grab the standard brush if I'm using applying alphas or using poly paint. The standard brush applies itself without too many modifiers, whereas the other types of brushes will have slightly different effects. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to select an alpha. Now, alphas are essentially like auto masks. Like, you know, if you paint in a mask, you can make your own alphas. And if I hover over some of these, you can see they're just black and white images. Black is transparent, white is solid. And if I grab this now and put it on drag rectangle and then drag that out, it should look way more interesting than that. I was painting before lunch. I can do all sorts of cool things. Now, in ZBrush, you already start off with some alphas, so feel free to have a little bit of a play with any of these, but I'm sure you can see just me sticking these things on, the amount of potential there is here. Alphas are super easy to find, and they are not quite as easy to make. But if you wanted to go and get a picture of some bark, for example, drop it into Photoshop, make it black and white, bump the contrast, save it out as a Photoshop file, you'll be able to import that as a texture, as an alpha. I recommend going and having a look on sites like ArtStation or Gumroad or Flip Normals. These are all really good places for you to find alphas. Sometimes you've got to buy them. A lot of the time you can find free alphas. Within the ZBrush here, if you want to have a look in the Lightbox, there will be a separate folder, and I think Ed has uploaded these to the image. So there's a couple of kind of skin texture alphas that are really nice. So if I grab this one, double click on it, it'll apply it. It'll apply it as my alpha, and I can do the same thing. Z add and Z sub make a big difference here, and so does intensity. Okay, what I'm going to do a little pass around the head with some of the textures that I've got. I bought myself a nice fair alpha a really long time ago. I'm going to show you, I'm going to apply a lot of this. Right? Actually, I think I need a much smoother approach to this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop down my subdivision levels, smooth this out a little bit. You notice there that as I ramped up back through the subdivision levels, it put some of those forms back in. This is what we want. This is kind of ideal. Let's ramp that intensity up, and I can now start to and sometimes it takes a little. I've not really played with these ones that. Oh, that's nice. And I'm just using the same one repeatedly here. Let's try out some different ones. Oh, he's going to get curly as he gets to. Nope. You do get into a habit with kind of when you're laying down alphas that there are kind of certain orders that you want to kind of move in, but really it's just about kind of laying these things down now. And but for me the trick with doing a good texture pass, it's not about just getting the best alpha. It's about applying them in a way that is considerate and thoughtful, and then doing the work afterwards. So I'm going to show you that as part of this demonstration. I'm just going to try and find some ones that I like. I'm not going to venture too far towards my symmetry line here, because what I want to do is add asymmetry to this, but not too much. Like if I start adding asymmetry now, it's going to take over the whole thing. It's actually going to make it much easier, much harder for me to get some of the effects that I want. But I'm just going to start to map in and fill some gaps. Like it's gone a bit janky over there, but again, for me, the real trick with this, the fun with this, is using it to lay down a nice range of texture, so that you're not spending kind of all of your time trying to decide what goes where. This is never going to be the final pass. I'm always going to be able to want to come in and adjust some of these things later on. Too close to the middle. Keep symmetry turned off. I think that'll be fine there. And because I've got this drag rectangle turned on, I can adjust my size, adjust my placement. If I'm not happy with where something is, I can just kind of Control Z and drag it back. Any little crashes like that I can fix later on. I'm not overly concerned about. But I'm trying to do bigger moves where I've got lots of. Ugh, that was shit. Ooh, when did that happen? So you can see kind of with this approach, you get to cover quite a lot of ground very, very quickly. And I always kind of find like with any sort of texture work, this is traditional sculpture or digital. The first couple of steps are kind of a little bit like, oh, that looks a bit naff. I want to change the direction there. With hair especially, but with wrinkles as well, you want to be very conscious of your direction. That's the real key to selling a good texture pass. It's the direction and kind of strength of that texture. Should really have practiced with fur beforehand, but I think this is going all right. Again, I'm sticking to mainly one texture stamp here for this. And I've gotten quite a lot of ground covered there. If I just do a quick Shift R to render, he's starting to look really nice. Yeah, really fast, which is great. Again, for those of us with that particular brand of Nora Spicy, this is a fucking huge dopamine release. You're like, look at how awesome I am. Right, I want to do a couple of things here. I want to drag in some asymmetry across that center point. Now that I've gotten, like, the closer you get to your line of symmetry, the more obvious the symmetry is. If it's two separate shoulders and it's this complicated, it's going to be fine. You're not going to see a difference. We can move things around a little bit later on. Again, I always like to work in symmetry for as long as humanly possible. But I'm going to turn it off right now, and I'm going to just kind of work across here. And I'm going to get some finer ones in there, and then across through the back of the arms, or form. I'm going much faster than I probably should because I don't want to keep you guys too distracted for too long. But now I can kind of work on the head. All right, round one. Pretty stoked with that. What I want to do now, I'm going to drop my intensity a little bit, make this a little bit less aggressive. See that I've got a slightly finer one. Let's grab this guy. I'm actually going to start to just, because I know my particular character has a kind of a break in fur or different colours that I can start to play around with. So if I just change the, what was it, sideways one? Nice little different texture. Let's do some of those around his face. I want to keep some of his face kind of light, but it'd be nice to just get a little bit of this furry kind of, so it kind of steps in. But I can do that manually afterwards as well. Excellent. So first pass. I've got a little fur pass in there. That's great. What I want to do is grab some wrinkles now. So I'm going to import some of my own alphas. I've got a bunch on my flash drive, so I'm going to hit import. I'm going to navigate to my own storage here. In my assets, I have things organized into alphas and brushes. I'm pretty sure I want some skin. For what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump in here. I've not organised these yet, but they're quite good. Select them all. Oh, did control click, not shift click. You can see over in the corner here, all of those alphas are being loaded in. Oh, they loaded in real quick. Now what I like about these is they're all really nicely organized. So if I start to come in now this is where it gets really fun. Look at the lovely little lines and free texture we've got here. I'm going to turn thingy back on. Let's go right eye, let's go. And again, you can be as aggressive with this as you want. If I wasn't happy with that, I can just ramp the intensity up a little bit. Starting to look a little too aggressive, so let's go back down some. And I'm trying to place these textures so that they flow with the forms that I've already made. So again, this is a little bit of kind of experience and a little bit of intuition and a little bit of kind of knowing how the textures on the face are made up. And I mean, this is a human face texture set, so it's not going to be Snorlax perfect, but it's going to get me some of the way there. Almost in the right place. Bless you. May take a couple of goes to get things feeling like they're in the right place. But yeah, don't be afraid of kind of readdressing and kind of a lot of these you can kind of smash into one another. That was a terrible placement. Needs to be more like that. Curve this one like this. And just not wrinkly enough for me. This might be optimistic. Oh, I think that's gone me somewhere. No, hate it, hate it, hate it. You guys, once you start getting into sculpture and texturing like this, you're going to start to become very acutely aware of the texture on people's faces. It's a weird, creepy habit, but once you start, you're not going to be able to get out of it. Let me do left eye, top, bottom, mid. Let's find a nose. Oh, that's a good one. across that nose now. Just a little bit more of this here. All right, so I've got a fairly reasonable pass on that. Yep, and that all, again, if I pop a render on that, you can see that that's starting to pop a little bit. I'm starting to feel like I've gotten really nicely baked in textures. Process for the hands and feet is exactly the same. What I'm going to do now, I just want to run through kind of the next steps. What I would do here is once I've kind of done this pass, it's a matter of coming in with my damn standard or other kind of diggy chiselly brush. I'm going to switch up my alpha on this. Just to a smaller, kind of alpha 40 might be quite nice for this. And now I can start to kind of come in and work. Too aggressive, turn that intensity down. And now, because I've got some marks that are already there, as I start to work through this, everything feels a little nicer and more homogeneous. Tighten up some moves around here. All right, mate. And then this is the real trick with getting a good texture. Coming in and working it and refining it. I think that alpha's a little aggressive, so I'm going to go for something that feels nicer. Maybe not. I've still got loads of work to do around here on the mouth. So I didn't really have an alpha to apply here, so I'm going to come back to that a little later. But I'm starting to think about all of the kind of compression, all of the interactions that might happen on this little face, and I'm just emphasizing and re-highlighting points that are kind of, I feel like are important. Again, let's bump that up a little. And I think that kind of as much as it feels kind of gross getting this first pass of texture on, once you start kind of digging into it and kind of highlighting it and using the material that's there to start telling the story, this is all kind of visual storytelling. These creases are telling the story of how this eye wrinkles and then compresses into the skin underneath. I always like the fact that kind of having the alphas on there helps me make those decisions, and kind of that's down to kind of how they're laid out as well. Taking the time to kind of plonk them in a way that feels like they flow in the right direction. Too aggressive. Let's turn that down again. I was a bit fat-handed with those, and step back a little, brush slightly smaller. Now, this is where kind of if I wanted to drop down a couple of subdivision levels, like I'm getting a little heavy-handed up here because I know I want to get more kind of more compression, but that compression wasn't sculpted in. If I drop down to a lower subdivision level, I can now kind of come in and be a little bit more aggressive with this. at a lower resolution. Let's bomb those through. Even using a, ooh, that was far too aggressive as a smooth. Even softening some of those out, but when I ramp up to the higher subdivision level, I've still got all that lovely texture there. So again, bopping it down if I want to add a little bit more weight to these. Ooh. Oh, pressure sensitivity's fallen over. All right, I'm gonna call it the end of that one because I can't actually. In fact, I can show you. Like if I wanted to make big changes to this now, I can just ramp all the way back down. All the texture gets applied. This is a great way to make big changes. Yeah, I am gonna have to restart my computer because pressure sensitivity's gone sideways. So that is a really rapid texture process. Now what I'm gonna do here is, just like I did on the face, I'm gonna come into all this fur and start working through that and building it up in places, and you know, places where it's kind of places where I've got textures kind of running into texture like that and it's looking a little bit jank, I can just tidy it all up. I think the real key is getting a bunch of material, a bunch of kind of surface down, and you can see how very quickly we go from something that is, you know, just mapped out to something that is actually feeling quite real. All right, I'm going to stop that one there. That is, what's that? Retopologizing and applying alphas.